Hi, this is Dr. Joe Green, head pastor of Antioch Assembly Church, located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, also the founder of the 2019 movement. And I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. I've been hearing this dust up about this Kanye West thing, and, people are calling Kanye West all kind of derogatory terms that they call black people, like Uncle Tom and a coon and those type of things. There was a CNN panel with Don Lemon and Bakari Sellers and some other people that they really denigrated Kanye West. Bakari Sellers went so far as to say, that's an example of a Negro who's not reading. If you get a chance and you see the actual conversation that Kanye West and Jim Brown had with Donald Trump, and if you take off the blinders of the hypnosis that mainstream media has against people or on people, and you really listen to what he says, it should put things in a different perspective. It's very ironic how, how this day and age we live in, it's like it's a form of witchcraft. It's a form of sorcery that's taking place. The mainstream media has this brainwashing, this great deception over the eyes of the people. So I want to break down some things. And like I said, everything I share resources, the research and the data. But what happens is the liberal left, they have to take everything out of facts and logic, and they have to maintain everything in an emotional level and a reactive level. And that's how we're being manipulated in this day and age. And it's really sad. It's really sad because when you really understand and you look beneath the surface and understand the plot and the plan of those who are really oppressing us as the 99 percenters, they call us the sheeple, or they call us human cattle, basically is what the globalists call most of us, especially people of color. But I want to tell you today that the biggest threat to black people, to all people, but especially black people, the biggest threat is not racism. It's not racist cops. It's not the things that mainstream media would try to convince you of being fearful of. But the biggest threat is globalism. The biggest threat is globalism. And if you do the research, I promise you'll see that's a true statement. And I would just pray that you have an open mind as you hear the facts. And like I said, I have a lot of people that want to debate and argue. They want to call you names and based on your opinions. And it's all based on a lack of evidence. Their opinion has no basis. If you ask them why they believe what they do, it's always some type of an emotional response or some kind of experiential response. I had one guy one time argue with me talking about white supremacy, and his evidence was that someone had sent a racist text. A white person had sent a racist text regarding black people. And of course, that was supposed to prove the point about what white supremacy represents. And I promise you, it doesn't matter in any environment you go to. You can go to a place that's all one race, all one nationality, and I promise you the same issues will be taking place. You'll have violence, you'll have murder, you'll have, certain people that are oppressing other people. There's always some kind of, separation and division that's caused. That's part of the human nature, and that's primarily due to what the enemy does. So if you go into South Central LA, you could go into all black communities and you had the Bloods versus the Crips. You go to Chicago, you go all over the place. They have Bloods versus Crips. You go in South America, you had MS-13 and other gangs that fight against each other. In South America, Nicaragua, you had the Contras versus the Sandinistas. You always had, and they were all the same ethnicity, all the same race. So you have to learn to look beyond the surface. You got to look at the real strategy that's taking place in order for you not to get taken advantage of. And it's really sad to see black people that are in such a state of stupor that they all have this monolithic, this singularity of thought that if you go against the liberal plantation, then you're a sellout. And they're really beating Kanye West up right now pretty bad. And it's because of a lack of understanding. See, one of the things you got to realize is if you do believe in white supremacy, which a lot of black people tout that that's our biggest enemy, white supremacy isn't really what people say it is. And if you watch any of my videos and subscribe to my channel, I have a lot of information out of there, a lot of documentation, books, and actual lectures that people have given that give you the real insight as to what's going on, but most people ignore that. I have a lot of people, they don't even look at the information. They just rebuke it. refute it, but they don't even have any type of information concerning that. So it's quite interesting when you realize that if you do believe in white supremacy as you tout that you do, CNN is owned by white supremacy. So why do you think that CNN and other mainstream media outlets are actually telling you the truth? If white supremacy is so oppressive and it's always stacked against people of color, why do you think that they actually are telling you information to be helpful to you? You got to realize that all the people that work for CNN, especially the black people, there's this what's called controlled opposition. It's called Boule. It's a Boule mindset. When you get a chance, look up the Black Boule, 1904. Before that, you had a gentleman by the name of Marcus Garvey who was really bringing black people together, strengthening the black community. He was a very successful businessman and independent free thinker. And so the powers that be, the power structure, the globalists, if you will, understood that Marcus Garvey was such a threat to their power structure that they had to do something to counteract his building up of the black community, because they still wanted to oppress black people. And even though slavery was abolished, they had a lot of money. They had made a lot of money off the slave trade, off of slave labor. And so they had to come up with a different way of offsetting their loss of income, because you got to realize even slavery and all the other stuff that we're talking about, the globalists, the internationalists, the ruling elite, they don't really care about races. They care about their bloodline families and the people that work for them. But they're ultimately, their God is Lucifer, and the God of Lucifer of this world system is mammon, or money. And so that's why the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. So anytime you look at one of their strategies, they're not personal, they're not emotional, they're very logically and calculated, and everything that they do is somehow or another is going to be some type of profit margin. So they're not even really mad at black people because they're black per se, even though they know spiritually they have to keep black people oppressed because of the spiritual inheritance that exists within black people. And if black people ever wake up and understand their spiritual DNA, it's going to be a problem for Lucifer and the one world governmental system. So they have to keep us off balance. But if you look at people like Don Lemon and Van Jones and Bakari Sellers and Mark Lamont Hill and all these people that are on CNN, they're part of the Boule system. They basically are sellouts against the rest of the people, because what the Boule mentality did was, because black people were getting so strong and independent, they had to raise up a generation of black leaders, so-called black leaders that are supposed to be the most intelligent, the talented, the most entertaining, and they employ them to carry out their plot. The NAACP, W.E.B. Du Bois, and the NAACP was created by the globalists, by the Zionists, and it was a way to control the narrative and to keep black people from ever succeeding in being completely free. So what they did is, when they raise up these black leaders, they bring them into to their secret organizations, secret societies, whether it's the Black Greek letter organizations or Masonic organizations or the Boule, which is all a part of that. They bring them in, they give them a seat at the table, and they pay them nicely for them to control the narrative. And so these people, they call them, W.E.B. Du Bois call them the talented 10th. It's like the top 10% supposedly of the black race that they use in order to keep the other 90% of the black people suppressed. And so they're the opinion makers. They're the ones that you see in the media and entertainment and political realms. They're all liberals and they're all Democrats. And so anytime you come off that mental plantation and you go against the Democrats and the liberal mindset, they have to send them in to do damage control. And so that's what's happening right now. They're doing damage control against Kanye West. So they all have to make it. And one of the things, if you get a chance to read the book, Rules for Radicals, Saul Alinsky, one of the strategy of the liberal left is to always marginalize the other person. So they have to make the person sound stupid or ridiculous. If you see how immature they are, a lot of times when they're getting in these arguments, they'll laugh the person off and say, oh, that's just so ridiculous. Everybody knows what you're saying is not true. That's a strategy that they've been using for a long time. And when you understand the strategy, you begin to see it. So they're trying to make Kanye West look like he's stupid, he's crazy, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But if you really listen to the words, now Kanye is a creative genius. And so he doesn't always articulate the way me and you would articulate. So you have to sit and really pay attention to him. Some of the terms he uses, some of the examples he uses, some of the language he uses is very colorful, and it's very colorful because he's a creator, he's an artist. But when you go beyond that and really listen to what he's saying, then you will understand that there's a lot of sanity and a lot of logic to what he's saying. So I want to break down part of what's going on here. When we talk about the globalists, and I tell you the biggest threat, I'm going to say this again, the biggest threat to black people in America is globalism. It's internationalist. This ruling elite that are the ones that are controlling and manipulating most of the affairs. They own the mainstream media. They own Hollywood. They own the music industry, and they have actually bought and paid for most of the politicians. And on the black side, it's the liberal Democrat politicians that they really have bought and paid for. And so these people have to carry out their agenda. They paint they're the ones that give the narrative, and whoever shapes the story or frames the story is usually the one that has the place of authority or the place of power. And so when you look at the panel, and I'm not going to show it to you now, but if you look at the panel, these people that were really trying to marginalize Kanye West, and they called him they called him a house Negro, and Bakari Sellers said that this is an example of a Negro that doesn't read. And what I'm here to tell you is that's idiotic. What they said, it wasn't true. They know it's not true, but it's the strategy that they use for people to marginalize Kanye West, because the power structure is so afraid of somebody like Kanye West waking up black people and taking them out of this stupor, this liberal stupor. They're so afraid of it that they are in damage control, and they need to marginalize him. They need to make him look stupid. And again, if you look at the actual strategy of the globalists that have been perpetrated against black people, it's the liberal left that's carrying it out. It's the Democrats that's carrying it out. And again, it's not my opinion. It's the actual documentation that they have. And one of the things I always want to clarify, a lot of people say, oh, how could you be for Trump? You're pro-Trump and you're pushing Trump. First of all, I am not, nor have I have I been a Republican. I was a Democrat from 1985 to 2012. I was a very loyal Democrat. And as I said several times, in 2004, I worked on the John Kerry presidential campaign because I was all in for the Democratic Party. But as I began to read and research and study, I started to realize that I had been deceived, that the actual oppressors, those people that were actually trying to destroy Black America, were the liberal Democrats. I mean, they're the ones who are carrying out the strategy that was meant to destroy black people. So it's the globalists that are real. They're the ones that control things. They're the ones who control the narratives. They're the ones who, like I said, they own the mainstream media. They own the Hollywood and the music industry, and people that are loyal to them have to carry. They can't go off the script, or else they'll try to marginalize them. When you look at the private prison industry, what they started in the 70s and the early 80s, the Republicans started the war on crime, but the Clintons and the Democrats took it in the early 90s and the late 80s, and they ran with it. They took it to such an extreme. The Clinton Foundation, the Clintons, the crime bill, all those things took it to such a high level. And when you understand that, mass incarceration and privatized prisons it was the Democrats from the 90s on that really pushed it to its extreme. One of the things that Kanye West said was about the 13th Amendment, and it's just amazing to me how they tried to act like what he was saying wasn't accurate. It was very accurate, because the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery, but what they did is they abolished slavery, except for it abolished involuntary servitude, except for if a person has committed a crime. And so that helped to give rise to the privatized prison industry and for-profit prison industry. Now, I mentioned the Clintons and the crime bill of 1994, Clinton crime bill. But what you need to understand is that because slavery and all these other things, like I said, is based on economics, when they passed the 13th Amendment and they made the exception to people that were incarcerated, then they began to pass things like the Negro Codes and Jim Crow laws. They began to do things like lock black men up for vandalism. I mean, not vandalism, but for vagrancy. So, like, say if a black man was standing around and he was doing nothing, that's called vagrancy, and they would lock him up and put him in prison and put him on the chain gang. If they were public intoxication, they would lock them up and put them away. If they didn't have a job, just simply not having a job could be a crime. And then they would trump up charges many times, and they would lock these black men. If you ever get a chance to see the movie Life with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence, it talks about that. So what they did is, after the South lost the Civil War, during the time of what was known as the Reconstruction period, they began to lock up these black men, put them in the chain gang, and put them in these for-profit prisons. And then they began to use them to help to rebuild the South. And so it's such a profitable thing that they continued that. And so when you understand that our prison system, it's called the prison industrial complex, that even though black people or black males make up less than 6% of the population, black males make up about 50% of the prison, the prison industrial complex in America. Black males are the highest incarcerated group of people in the world. There's more black men in prison in America than any other place in the world. And America has the largest amount of people that's in prison. So you also know that many of these prisons are for profit. There's many corporations that use the free labor of people that are in prisons. So the prisoner gets paid maybe 8 to 10, 15 cents an hour or something ridiculous like that. But the products that they're used to make some of these farms that they actually use to farm and make other products for corporations obviously get sold for regular price on the free market. So you figure, and I'm just using for example, if I bought a shirt and the shirt costs $25, if the company, instead of paying minimum wage, which depending on where you're at could be $10 an hour or $15 an hour or $7.50 depending on what state you're in, instead of the company having to pay $7.50 an hour for the labor to produce that shirt, they can pay an inmate 10 cents an hour. Imagine the amount of profit that they make off of that shirt. So it's very profitable for them to do that, to perpetuate that. So what Kanye West was saying was very true. And the sad part about it is we had a black president for 8 years. President Obama had the ability to make change of the prison industrial complex. He did nothing because, guess why? Because he's he works for the globalists. He's the internationalist. George Soros was one of the biggest funders for President Obama. And he's given him a large amount of money even after he left office for him to carry out his globalist agenda. And I know a lot of black people don't want to accept that. They don't want to accept the fact that Obama was the same as Bush and Clinton. They were all globalists. But that's the facts. You can't argue with the facts. So now people are beating up President Trump. President Trump is actually having meetings with people and trying to do something about the privatized prison, or I should say prison reform, criminal justice reform. And here's the vicious cycle. And I just want to talk about this Boule mentality. When I say Boule, or you hear me say controlled opposition, Hegelian dialectic. So what they do is they raise up these so-called black leaders who are supposed to be fighting for civil rights, but they're actually working for the oppressive system. Anybody you see on CNN that's a commentator that's parroting the same narrative that black people have been talking about since the 60s. Those people work for the system. They work for white supremacy, and their job is to oppress the other 90% of black people, which is why, think about this vicious cycle. President Trump gets in office. They call him a racist. He was never called a racist all the years that he was out in the public, right? He has pictures with all these black leaders, the Jesse Jacksons, the Al Sharptons, the rappers, Snoop Dogg, all these rappers, and were friends of him for all these years. And then all of a sudden he runs for a Republican Party presidential candidate, and then all of a sudden they stamp racism because that's their job. That's what they have to do. That because they believe that black people are so stupid and so brainwashed that they believe if they can stamp the title racism on them, that black people automatically shut it down with no facts. And it works. Most black people, it works. But there's more and more black people that are waking up. But anyway, so you have Trump. He gets in office. They stamp him as a racist. He says, okay, I want to have sit-down meetings with these people. So he talks to the Congressional Black Caucus, John Lewis, Max Maxine Waters, Kamala Harris, all these people that are gatekeepers for white supremacy. He invites them to come and talk to him. They go, we will not come. We won't come to your inauguration. We don't want to sit down and talk to you. We don't have anything to do with you, right? So then he keeps the invitation out, and then people like Kanye West or Steve Harvey or somebody comes to the White House, Jim Brown, and then they turn around and call these people Uncle Toms and say, you're a sellout because you went and sat down and talked with him because he's a racist. So what the intention is, what the goal is that if nobody sits and talks with him, nothing gets done, nothing changes. And they say, see, we told you he didn't care anything about black people. But unfortunately, not everybody is stupid enough to fall for this plan. There's people that's actually seeing through this, more and more people. And they're saying, well, hey, you know, he is the president. It's his obligation to do something for us. Why would we not sit down and talk with him? Why would we not sit down and meet with him? If I really had that strong of opinion about him being a racist, I should sit across the table and be able to look at him and say, I don't think you're going to do anything for black people, and prove it to me that you care about us. That's what should be done. But because the game is fixed, it's rigged, they won't do that. And so what they'll do is they'll stand back, and they'll not only will they, it's like the scripture where Jesus said about the Pharisees. He said, you won't get into heaven, and you're going to keep other people from getting into heaven too. So these black leaders, they don't want black people to be successful, because if we supposedly solve the problem of racism, then most of these race baiters will be out of a job. They'll be irrelevant, and they don't want to do that. Or they'll be exposed because all of the districts that these congressional black caucus leaders are in are horrible. You look in John Lewis's districts, the school districts are bad, high crime, high drug rates. Maxine Waters out in California, same thing. These people are getting rich. Maxine Waters is a very wealthy person. All these black leaders are getting wealthy, but the people that they're supposed to be, fighting on behalf of, they're getting in worse and worse shape. So they're not trying to solve any problems. You have to realize that. That's why they're so strategic in trying to tear down Kanye West. Whether you like Kanye or not, whether you agree with what he said or not, whether you like President Trump or not, that's irrelevant. At the end of the day, truth should matter, and we should want to get to the truth. So in the next couple of minutes, let me break down parts of the very clear strategy that's been employed by the internationalists. And again, this is in their writings. You can see. So the three main ideologies is Darwinism, socialism, and communism, right? So communism is Marxism, socialism is Friedrich Nietzsche, and of course Darwinism is Charles Darwin is it's based on his philosophy. Now, how does that all play in? These are the globalists. They believe that the population of the world should be no more than 500 million. So population control and depopulation are the primary tools of what they use, and they're using socialism and communism and Darwinism as a means to push those things. So these are all things you can look up for yourself. So when you talk about Darwinism, Darwinism is based on race theory, which says that certain races are better than others. Of course, the globalists or the Zionists, the 0.5% of the world, they don't really care about white or black. They just use white or black to manipulate the situation and the circumstances. So what they did is with Darwinism, they convinced white people as a whole that black people were less evolved. And because of that, that is how they were able to get slavery to continue for a period of time, even though eventually it was, the abolitionists in America, many of them were white Christians. Frederick Douglass and the other abolitionists, they really pushed, and it was based on Christianity, that every man, has God-given rights by God, and that black people were human beings too. That was what the abolitionists used to push it. And of course, it was this Darwinist mindset of the globalists that they pushed to help perpetuate slavery. So when you think about that, and they tried to act like black people were inferior races, which is Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, the foundation of abortion is based on social Darwinism, that black people are less evolved and they are inferior races, and so you should limit the amount of them or do away with them. But they couldn't out and out kill them anymore because it was illegal, and it became unpopular for them just to lynch black people. So they came up with this. This is based on social Darwinism, which was abortion. Also, abortion is, the Bible talks about when they sacrifice their babies to Baal. So these globalists that worship Lucifer actually use abortion as a way to feed their God, if you will, through abortion, through child sacrifice. Slavery. Again, I already talked about that, how slavery was part of Darwinism, that they basically said that, you know, it was okay to own a slave because a slave is like an animal. It's called chattel slavery. They're like property because they're just like an animal because they're less evolved. You had mass incarceration. So it was okay for them to lock black people up because they don't think black people, with social Darwinism, they don't think that black people will ever evolve and get better. So if a person is a criminal or they grew up in a criminal environment, then they're always going to be a criminal. They can never change. So it's okay for them to lock up black people for long periods of time because of social Darwinism. Now, when you think about the war on drugs and you think about the crime bill, the Clinton crime bill, they gave 100-to-1 sentences for crack cocaine, which was primarily sold in the black and Hispanic communities. And so their mindset was these black people should be, locked up for a long period of time because you can never rehabilitate them. Plus, they make money off of them because they're less evolved. The welfare system. The welfare system is based on socialism, which is also based on Darwinism, which is why the welfare system is set up the way it is. It was meant to oppress black people to get them loyal to the Democratic Liberal Party so they could continue to carry out their plans. So at the end of the day, they never believed that black people could change their environment, but they not only did they believe it, but they convinced black people that the only way that they can succeed and feed their family was through the government taking care of themselves. So they enhance and enlarge government handouts, governmental programs in order to get black people to not only be dependent on the government, but more specifically on the liberal Democrats. So when we talk about socialism, if you look at our inner cities that are run by the Democrats, they're based on this whole socialism concept or construct, which always keeps people there. They control the environment, who comes in and who comes out. So drugs, gang violence, and failing schools, that's the sign of all these major cities that are run by Democrats. It's intentional. They're not trying to make these situations better, which is why from the last 50 years in these inner cities, the statistics have gotten worse. So they have failing schools and all of them because that is a guarantee that you'll be able to fund the prison industrial complex. High rates of drugs, of course. They funnel drugs in there, and then you have cops that go in there and they racially profile people and lock them up for long periods of time. You have that they can't get out of that. The property values are always very low. So even if a person owns a house, they're not able to build a lot of equity in their house, and so it continues to perpetuate. Then you have slumlords that come in. All these things are part of their socialism slash communistic construct that is a part of the Luciferian New World Order system, because ultimately their goal, their schemes, and their strategies are not just going to be for people of color. It's like they were like test subjects. They're like experimental, experimenting on these groups of people, where ultimately their desired goal is for all humanity to be under these same type of strategies. Housing projects were created intentionally to help to house people in close-knit communities, and they could control everything. Plus, a lot of these housing projects are people on Section 8, and there's never an idea that they'll be able to get out of it. They're not, and the school system that's based on the Prussian model of education, it's not meant to cause people to be independent thinkers, business owners, and independent to take care of themselves, but it's created in a way to get people dependent on the government, to just work in factories, or always just never come out of the box, always stay in their condition, and pass it on generationally. And so when you understand this, and you understand the actual plan and the strategy and the real enemies, which are the globalists or the internationalists, as David Rockefeller talked about. David Rockefeller is one of the bloodline families of the globalists, the Illuminati. And he admits, in his writings, in his memoirs, if you looked at my other video, I actually have a copy of his memoirs where he admits that he's part of a secret cabal, this his family, and to basically destroy America and have a new world order. He also, there's a speech in 1991 where he gave thanks to mainstream media that helped them to push their conspiracy along. So all these things are real. So what I want you to do, my desire is for us, especially as black people, is to come off this liberal plantation. Bottom line, we should know as black people that it is something very strange that how the whole system that we have admitted has been skewed against us. We call it white supremacy. How is it this whole system is all coming together to focus against one person? That's President Trump. And anybody whose ideology varies from the narrative that they've been giving black people for so long. So they ignore the fact that the condition of black people is bad. They ignore the fact that President Obama didn't do anything for black people while he looked out for gays and immigrants and all those other people. They ignore all that. And they tell you that if you question the narrative, then you're either a sellout, you're stupid, or you're Uncle Tom. But that's all intentional, because what it is they're assuming that black people don't have enough sense to come to think for themselves, to research things and look. And so far, I must tell you that they've been right so far. We have to wake up. We have to stop with this the same old mentality. It's insanity doing the same thing for 50 years and expecting different results and ignoring the results that we get. And so I just pray that you open your eyes. Now, there are more and more people that are coming off of that liberal plantation. President Trump's support from Black America is increasing, even though it's still small. But it's just the rhetoric. It's just the fact that people like Don Lemon and Bakari Sellers and all these other April, whatever her name is, I can't think of her name, CNN, all these people that work for the system of white supremacy, we shouldn't allow them to have a voice, because they're lying to us, they're deceiving us, and ultimately they're working for the very system of oppression that we say that has been destroying our communities for 50 years. They're still doing the same thing, and we're still riding with them. So it's time for us to wake up and to walk away. Peace and blessings to you. This has been Dr. Joe Green. I love you, and may God open the eyes and the ears of your understanding, and that you may know the truth, and let the truth set you free. Be blessed.